because it was such a smash hit. But don't worry, I'll bring it back. I'll do it again. But I just wanted to quickly go on and share a few funny stories about online dating in Portland over the last few years, or maybe 5, 6 years, and then use that as a microcosm to share some larger societal trends that I've really noticed. And I would say, just in a general sense, the trend that I've noticed increasing the most is people becoming so well versed in pop psychology terminology or Marxist moral relativism, political speak, or spiritual double speak that their immediate gut response, programmed response to things is almost entirely dedicated to undermining any sense of solidity or authenticity that they might encounter. And I can share with you dozens of stories to perfectly illustrate that point, whether that's in a dating context, people that I met in the healing world, people that I met in the spiritual world, people that I met in really across so many demographics here. And it's not just here, it's a widespread cultural phenomenon that I've really seen. So I'll repeat it. These are the three basic tools that people use. On one hand, you have, or number one, you have all the pop psychology sort of terminology, doublespeak that people use. Secondly, you have the Marxism, moral relativism, political speak that people use. And then you have thirdly, some nonsense of spiritual doublespeak, spiritual bypassing, and just using words that really have nothing to do with their original definition, their original usage, their original application. So this engenders a person to, anytime they encounter any sense of solidity or authenticity, to automatically try and undermine it, or let's say gaslight it, to use that stupid terminology, or in some way, shape, or form, just basically avoid any degree of actual accountability or responsibility or authenticity within themselves. So, in a dating context, I can give you a great example where I would say, if I look back over the last, let's just say, 8 years in general. Now, I'll say as a caveat, I've had a lot of good experiences. I've met a lot of good people. It's not all bad. People aren't all bad. Women aren't all bad. Dating isn't all bad. Portland isn't all bad. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just specifically highlighting and focusing on certain dynamics that are problematic. And I see the core motivating factor as being the same across the board. So that's all I'm focusing on. So please, let's not jump to these assumptions and conclusions that I'm saying something is all bad or all, whatever, which that's not what I'm saying. So the the number one overarching reason that I've had so many people that I met or people that I was talking to kind of fizzle out is, I'll tell you this. Basically, if I mention anything about having my own business or being an entrepreneur or being independently employed and being somewhat autonomous for the last 15 or so years, that loses a lot of people automatically. And I can tell you, there's a handful of people that told me specifically, oh, I was really interested in you. You seem cute until you mentioned that you had your own business. And then I just thought you were an arrogant prick. I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm just stating a fact. I'm not stating it in a way that I'm better or worse than anyone, because that's not what I believe. I don't actually think it's better or worse. It's just different. So that's definitely something that's happened. The second piece to that is, if I mentioned, yeah, I don't really drink. I mean, occasionally maybe I'll have a cocktail or occasionally I'll have a glass of wine, but it's not really my go-to thing. I don't smoke weed. I don't want to get high. I don't do drugs. I don't want to party. I don't want to stay out late. I don't want to basically try to live as if I'm still in college or I'm still a teenager, because I'm not. And I like to go to bed early. I like to wake up early. I like to be active. I like to, you know, basically have a relatively kind of boring regular life, right? And just those things alone already filter out so many other people, which it's like, wait, so being stable, dedicated, focused, healthy, those are all somehow undesirable qualities in in this current cultural environment for a lot of people. And I had women even say, I really hope you find that wholesome girl you're looking for. I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm not. Like, what 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 bizarro world are we living in where these basic normal facets are somehow undesirable? Um, so that's something I noticed quite a lot. And I could also tell you probably a dozen or more stories about in so many other encounters where I can give you a good one right now. I was trying to plan a date with someone who seemed whatever, fine, normal. We were just chatting a little bit. We were going to meet for a picnic in the park in spring or something, right? So we're trying to plan and orchestrate who was going to bring what. And I just said, like, if you want to bring kind of the main food, I'll bring the drinks and some dessert because that's what I feel more comfortable and well versed in, and I can introduce you to some cool stuff. And they're like, you can bring the food. And I'm like, wait, what? Like my mindset is we don't know each other, we're strangers, so like let's both contribute and bring something to this, and it's kind of like a group effort. And that way we also both know that we'll both have something that we'll like and be happy with, and we can introduce each other to new things. It's like a way to kind of get to know each other and have conversation, things like that. So then I was really confused as to why they were so snappy and defensive with me. So then I was like, well, maybe it's like I asked them, I was like, it's some kind of like feminism thing of me like suggesting you should bring the food. And they were like, yeah, I did not appreciate that. And I'm like, dude, I was just trying to to plan a basic date, but never mind. I can tell you another story. I was chatting with someone, just basically being like, uh, what do you do? What are you into? Do you do this? Do you do that? Going back and forth. It's like, oh, do you like to cook? Because I don't really cook. I just eat out a lot. And they were like, can you build a house? And I was like, what? What are you talking about? I was like, yeah, I can pay someone to build a house, but I don't personally have firsthand knowledge about how to build a house. And then I just thought, well, why are they so upset? And I asked, like, is this some kind of like feminism thing about me asking you? They're like, oh, yeah, I did not appreciate that question. I was very triggered by it. And I'm like, well, I was just making conversation. Like, how are you triggered by that? And then I just realized, like, wow, these people's lives are so good that they have to invent these such trivial things to basically create conflict or somehow disqualify people. But it again basically just reiterates my point of people being so deeply embedded in pop psychology, doublespeak, Marxist relativism, political dogma, or some degree of spiritual doublespeak that they just become entirely dedicated to undermining any sense of solidity or authenticity that they encounter, just creating and perpetuating massive amounts of conflict. I can tell you another example. I was talking to this lady and she was telling me how she's like so into doing yoga and Buddhism and whatever. And I was just kind of like, oh, okay, maybe she's like really interested in it because she said she's really interested in it. She's like kind of a scholar. So I tried to approach her on that grounds based on her identity and all the things she said. I'm like, yeah, it's a funny thing about Buddhism. Like, there's a 500-year gap between the life of this person and their death and then the emergence of this ism. And I was like, and they didn't really write things down back in the day. They didn't have, you know, record keeping like they do now. I was like, so it's funny how this thing that we have nowadays we think is attributed to this person, but there was like a 500-year gap between their life and the emergence of the ism. That to me seems very interesting. Secondly, a lot of what we encounter in America is just kind of like a modernization or something that was just kind of watered down and adapted to kind of sell things. So I'm thinking this person says they're a scholar, it says they're really interested in the thing. And secondly, they're also kind of skeptical of capitalism and how it can pervert things. So I thought, oh, we can connect on these grounds. Well, I was wrong. Turns out their response was, "Look, I'm not gonna let another fucking white man tell me what's what. All these fucking white guys out here, they think they understand all these things, and I'm just not gonna let a white guy tell me anything." And I'm like, "What? I'm not trying to tell you anything. I'm just stating things that are true with the intention and the objective and the attitude to connect with you on things that you've already demonstrated or claimed were core values for you. So I was trying to connect with you on those things. I'm not trying to tell you anything. So again, another another like pop psychology, Marxist, relativist gut reaction, right? But again, it's just me, I guess, being an idiot and trying to connect with people based on what they say and what they claim their actual identity is, but being just met with complete resistance. I can give you another great illustration of probably the 50 to 100 people that I've met that are really into their imagination. They're really into their imagination. They're really into escapism and living in some kind of fantasy world that is probably appropriate for children. But they do that under the label of qigong or spirituality or something along those lines, right? So they're engaged in imagination and fantasy and feeling maybe light tingling on their nervous system at best, and they think it's this profound transcendental thing. And I'm like, look, this has nothing to do with anything related to the terms in which you think it has anything to do with. Obviously, I don't say it quite that explicitly. Try to do it in more of a communicative, rapport building, gentle kind of way. But that's the general idea. And I can tell you the hundreds of people that I've encountered that when faced with any degree of actual solidity or authenticity, even for something that they claim to be massively invested in, their response is some kind of doublespeak, gaslighting, like undermining cop out. And I can think of whether it's tea schools or people that are into tea or so many different things in this genre where people are just engaged in the same behavior of believing in things that are not real and then committing to the things that are not real when they encounter anything that remotely resembles something that's real. So, wrapping all this up, what does that say about these people? And what does that say about the environment that produces them and supports them and validates them? The fact that if they encounter any degree of solidity, consistency, calm, clarity, or basic morality, their gut response is to shoot it down, to undermine it, to question it, to invalidate it. Not on any like substantial basis of like, oh well, A, B, and C is true, but this isn't true. Da, 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 da. It's more so some emotional attack. Basically, here's what you said and here's what's occurring, but let me pivot it over to something that's not really related, that's feeling and emotion based for me to argue from that position. Because if people are arguing from feelings and emotions, it's there, it's already lost, it's already over. That's it. It's done. You're not dealing with rationality or logic or anything. You're dealing with just some degree of propaganda at the end of the day. And funny enough, to sum this up, I will share with you a joke story that I wrote back in 2018. It said, a student once asked Confucius, Master, why did they invent science and religion? Confucius replied, well, originally you had a few individuals who genuinely sought to have clarity and truth and to understand the true nature of things by directly perceiving the mechanics and the causal interrelationships which underlie manifestation. But then what happened was those individuals were ridiculed, persecuted, and killed because their findings might have been paradoxical and probably did not mesh well with the predominant dogma of that time. So then what we are left with is a great majority waving the flag of truth and of freedom, but in reality they lack personal responsibility and any semblance of courage to touch upon those qualities within themselves in any meaningful, tangible, or experiential way. Thus, they need external authorities to continually justify their rearrangement of delusion, violence, and unexamined aspirations. That's a way of giving yourself permission to engage in all manner of insanity and delusion because someone superior or some institution tells you that it's okay. So the student replied, Master, I don't like this view. I'm feeling very triggered right now. I'm going to go and start a boycott and make sure that you're never able to spread this hate speech again. I would rather be consumed by my own insanity and defend my own emotional reactions based on my misinterpretations of events, rather than engaging with any points that you actually brought up. I'll instead attack your character or bring up unrelated points so I can move the conversation to such a low level of functioning then I then feel confident that I might be able to win or at least compete. To which Confucius replied, if you hang with pigs, you might get shit on you. So you're out here with your standardized views, looking for other standardized views to support your standardized views. Thus, you can only think in standardized views, which are views in which someone already standardized and gave to you. So for whatever reason, I posted that story like 6 years ago in 2018 on this date. And I think it also perfectly encapsulates and was more or less ahead of its time because it's really what we've been seeing play out over the last 6 years or so. And it's really the underlying conflict that you'll encounter time and time and time again. Even if you are, and as another example, even if you have an opinion of a situation or an event that is different than what is on the news, basically people are so brainwashed now that their immediate response is that that is conspiracy theory or it's just completely untrue because it wasn't on the news. It's like that just proves that just shows goes to show how effective the whole system is, how people, even if ideas are have the ability to stand independently on their own, they don't need external validation or approval from authorities. They stand on their own, based on their own validity. But people are so habituated and brainwashed and programmed to undermine authenticity or truth or honesty or anything that it's just like, oh, I just can't even process it. And if that doesn't make any sense, then you can just look at how COVID has gone down and how so many political things in our society have gone down really for quite a long time. These dynamics aren't new. They just happen to be exaggerated and enhanced because of all of the technology and access to information that people have now that makes them feel smart. So in short, people attach to, pop psychology doublespeak, or they say stupid Marxism, moral relativism, political ideas, or they do some kind of spiritual doublespeak because it makes them feel smart, it makes them feel independent or capable or strong or free or whatever these things. But in reality, the opposite is true because if they actually had those internal qualities within themselves, they wouldn't need these handlebars, these training wheels, these crutches, these predefined, standardized, generic views that, of course, yes, have some validity in certain cases. But if that becomes your default response, you're making yourself less human is basically what you encounter. But then if your self-image is I'm evolved, I'm modern, I'm doing self-help, I'm doing spirituality, I'm doing all these things, but you're actually doing the opposite, and then now you're also a hypocrite and a liar. So that's a whole other level of thing. And that's honestly, I can tell you, one of the last times that I tried to engage in one of these arenas was like a local tea school in Portland. I went maybe for like some Christmas thing or something. And I remember I was just sitting there like, I mean, I don't know if that was my exact expression, but that's how it felt. So I thought, oh my, like, and I had to catch myself because I just realized, what the fuck are these people talking about? What fantasy world are we living in here? Like, how much delusion can we spin in one fucking sitting, dude? I just was like, okay, I can't do this anymore because it's just not true. It's just all based predicated on deceit, dishonesty with yourself and now with others. But if everyone is equally lying to themselves, then it can kind of work because you validate their life, they validate your life, and then it's a functional relationship. But if you're interested in anything remotely resembling the truth, like for example, someone sits there and drinks a tea and they're like, "Oh my God, this opened my microcosmic orbit. Energy is just like moving up and down my spine and circling through because I took a sip of tea and it's like now I'm feeling white lights coming in, like all this shit." And I'm like, "Bro, no, that's not true." I'm like, classically, if those things occur, you would be levitating and like literal fire and water would be shooting out of your pores. That's classically what all of the traditional religions and traditions said were the actual indicators of this thing occurring. Or even with Buddha, when he attained whatever he attained, he literally turned into like 100 foot tall golden Buddha and like floated in the sky. People think that's a metaphor. It's probably fucking literal. But people were so incompetent, weak, and silly that they think, oh, I took a sip of tea and maybe I feel some tingling thing that interacts with my imagination. So this is what's occurring. It's like, no, dude, it's literally just your imagination. It's literally just if I put my mind on my finger and I move my awareness up and down my finger, it will tingle. Why? Because it's my nervous system interacting with itself slightly. That's it. It's not profound. It's not otherworldly. It's literally just exactly what it is. So then you arrive at a place where if you're talking about something exactly what it is, and then everyone else is engaged in fantasy and deceit and delusion and all this other nonsense because they're completely hypnotized and bamboozled by their own emotional disassociated state, what you end up with is conflict, which I could sit here for the rest of the day and give you story after story after story and interaction after interaction. But I think I've given you enough stories to basically illustrate the point of what I've been trying to say is that ultimately people become so well versed in these things that they almost develop a whole different level of ignorance and dysfunction. But they tell themselves that the opposite is true because they can speak in lingo, but it doesn't actually mean anything. But then these people are also against corporate exploitation. They're against marketing. They're against capitalism. They're against all of these things on the grand scale, but they're doing it to themselves 24/7. So that's hypocrisy. That's an extremely weak position to operate from, which means you're an impotent, disempowered individual, which means you can't actually do anything, which means you'll probably be frustrated. What are you going to do with your frustration? You're going to blame society. You're going to blame people with actual power. You're going to try to shoot them down. If you encounter any validity, anything that resembles solidity or truth or honesty, you're going to shoot them down. Why? Because of your own internal moral conflict. The last thing I'll say is going back to my funny Confucius story is that I can tell you from making YouTube videos for 14, 15 years, basically 99.8% of every negative comment that I've got is rather than engaging with any of the points you actually brought up, I shall instead try to attack your character or say something personally diminutive or passive aggressively digging at you as a person, or pivot to some unrelated point so that we can basically move the conversation to some unrelated low level of functioning that they might hopefully have a chance at. That's the vast majority of what I've seen. And I've seen what on YouTube as well. But if you just look in real life when people encounter actual solidity or truth or substance, that's what they pivot to. "Ugh." You just can't deal with it. Which then, what does that say about their characters? So, long story short, I'm going to wrap this up in a minute. My point is, if let's say a person goes into the dating world and they meet rejection because they are they're disciplined, dedicated, focused, have a basic sense of morality, meaning they're not sexually promiscuous, they're not going out and getting hammered, they're not trying to take advantage of people, they're not misleading people or being disingenuine. Let's say a person has those traits and has those qualities and they meet a lot of rejection. What does that say about the overall environment? What does that say about the situation? What does that say about the context? What does that reflect about the individuals that they are encountering? If someone is in a dating context and one of the biggest red flags, one of the biggest misnomer, one of the biggest missteps is that, oh, they don't really like to drink. And the person's like, oh, I don't know if it's going to work then. What does that say about that person? What does that say about their depth of understanding and relating to other people? There's probably not a lot there. Maybe the person who let's just take the context out wider. Let's say the person who rejects another person for choosing to not really drink and not do drugs and not party and basically not have to escape from their life. Okay, they reject people because they're not interested in intoxication, escapism, and promiscuity. But then they also completely believe whatever's on the news, with most of which is completely untrue. They have all these weird conspiracy theories about society, whether it's feminism or red pill or the patriarchy or whatever else it might be. Taking all of these things aside, what does that say about the person? And let's say their spiritual outlook is based on doing drugs, based on ramping up their immune system, based on being disembodied and engaging with their imagination, engaging in things which don't really develop their character and don't really translate to actual real life. What does that say about that person? What does that say about who they are? And then if we look at, well, what are, and they probably have a lot of health problems. Just off the top of my head, probably depressed, probably anxious, probably frustrated, probably has sleep and digestive issues and or autoimmune conditions. And if they're a female, they probably have irregular periods or some in degree or some imbalance in their menstrual cycle. Just a rough guess. And then what if all of those things were somehow interconnected? What if they were in fact the same process? What if that process was in actuality what Chinese medicine originally was trying to refer to, that instead people took off to mean as some spiritual grandiose thing, which it actually has nothing to do with that, because we translated the word Shen as spirit, which is not even really remotely what it means, more so like basic psychological health. What if that's actually what that means, and what that's actually what holistic health means? But what if you're a person like me, you go into the holistic health world and you communicate what holistic health actually means and actually looks like and actually should manifest as, and then people shoot you down through passive aggressive psychological doublespeak, Marxism, moral relativism, or some spiritual doublespeak. What does that say about them? That they are individuals engaged in an act, but then when they are presented with the actual definition in a clear, concise, tangible, realistic, practical, pragmatic way, and they reject it, then perhaps they're not actually engaged in that in that real thing, and they're not actually engaged in it for the reasons that they think they're engaged in it, which is kind of pretty much all I've been saying for the last 10 years or so. And I think I can count on one hand the times I feel like people are like, oh yeah, I get that. Because I think sometimes people misconstrue what I'm saying. Maybe they think I'm being angry or hostile or judgmental, or I'm like, yeah, fuck the system, fuck people. And they're like, oh, yeah, I have that angst. I agree with his angst. But that's actually not what I'm saying. That's not where I'm coming from. And that's not how I feel. That's not what I believe. And that's not how I live my life. It's just people say, oh, what he's saying kind of approximates what I might feel. So I like him. But then it's funny, those same people they'll love me on day one, but then on day two, if I say something that maybe makes them feel a different way or I do something they don't approve of, then now they're out. Which I can tell you how many times it's happened where people were like, "Oh my God, loving the videos," and the next day they're like, "Oh my God, I'm so disappointed in you. This is so terrible. I thought you were this, but now I think you're not this, and now you're negative." Which is why I've been saying for years, the crucifix and the pedestal tend to exist pretty close together. So people come on with all of this, wow, you're so good. Wow, you're so this. Wow, you're so that. That's not what they mean. What they mean is, I project you in this way because I want to make myself feel a certain way. Like if you see a celebrity eating dinner at a restaurant, you're like, oh my God, it's a celebrity. I'm going to meet the celebrity. It has nothing to do with them. It's all just about how you feel because you think they're cool and you think they're higher and superior than you. So you get attention or validation or some connection with someone who you put in a position of authority, and that makes you feel good. That's what's actually occurring. That's the actual transaction. That's the actual dynamics. Whether or not people want to admit that or realize it, I think that's probably not the case because celebrity culture and celebrity worship in our current society is profound, and I don't think it's going away anytime soon. So, anyways, hopefully that makes sense and is entertaining or useful. It's just a few stories to illustrate a few different points that I repeated in a bunch of different ways to hopefully drive the point home. If it doesn't make sense, this is another thing that I can say. In 15 years of making videos, I can really probably think of something on, I can probably count on one hand the time someone said, can you explain this further? Can you clarify this? Can you expand this more? Or I don't understand this. I can count on one hand the time, the amount of times in 15 years that's actually occurred versus usually it's this sounds like what I already believe and feel, so I like it. Or I don't like this. I'm out. So again, if this is how we're living our life, that's not very intelligent. If we're just going around looking for, I like this, I don't like this, I agree, I don't agree, I like this, I don't like this, I agree, I don't agree, then we're just like hamsters on a wheel. Society is just basically like, boom, boom, just going to be pressing our buttons all the time. Of course, that's there. Of course, that's a part of our experience. But why? And then how can we really agree or disagree if we don't understand? Do we even understand? How can we arrive at solutions if we don't understand? Which is the last thing I'll say, which I think is funny, is I'll tell you another story where I was dating this girl briefly who was a therapist, and she was specializing in working with people that were into trans and wanting to transition. And this was maybe like 2018, 2017 or so. And I'll say that my initial response and my assumption of those things was like, yeah, not really a fan. Maybe it's just like mental illness, and I don't really think this should be pushed as a massive societal agenda. People want to do it. That's cool. It's their free right. It's whatever. But like in terms of like billions of dollars pushing it as a social agenda, I'm not so sure. But I met this person. I was like, well, let me just try to be open. Let me try to learn and understand and really get more experience about this. So this lady starts telling me about, the emotional experience that people were going through, how they feel. They feel lost. They feel disconnected. They feel all these things. And I'm like, okay, cool, for sure. I can understand how people would feel that way and they think this will solve their problem. So, like, on a human level, I totally get it. I'm totally on board. So it's like this thing that I was kind of skeptical and already against, but I met someone and I was actually open to hearing what they were saying and understanding it and accepting it. It also turned out that the lady was like completely, let's say, unrealistic in many ways, but I'm just saying these things for context. So, moving the story along, we dated, and basically, after a short time of dating her, she said I was the most sensitive, kindest, most empathic, intuitive, like gentle yet strong guy she'd ever met. She felt so comfortable with me. She felt so seen, so heard, so understood. She felt like I just really saw her for who she was. I made her feel comfortable and understood. Maybe we didn't agree on everything, but it's like it was just really all of those things that she'd never really experienced from men before, right? Or from many people in general. And I'm just thinking like, okay, yeah, whatever, fine. And I mentioned this also as a side note, like I've heard that from a lot of different women, a lot of different people, which this will tie back to in the second. So she was saying this, and then also at the end of the relationship, she was saying that I was a misogynist, toxic guy, uh, that wasn't emotionally open, and I was like, just reinforcing the patriarchy. Why did she say that? I'll tell you why she said that. She said that because one time I walked by her closet and I said, "Oh, that's a lot of shoes," because her closet was open and she had like no joke, like 50 pairs of shoes. For context, I have 3 pairs of shoes, so to me, 50 is a lot. And I was just like, "That's a lot of shoes," kind of joking or whatever. So that was a toxic masculinity microaggression. I was like, wait, you said I'm the most sensitive, like, you said all these things, but then now I'm fucking toxic masculinity and I'm misogynistic. I hate women, apparently. Okay. Uh, so there was another time where we went to a hot springs. We were gonna go to dinner. We went to like a hot springs, like hot tub kind of place first, doing some soaking and sauna and steaming, and then we're gonna go out to dinner. So keep in mind, my hair is really short. I'm a guy. I went into the locker room in and out in like 90 seconds. And I'm waiting. She pops out in like 2 minutes. And I said, "Oh, wow, it was a lot quicker than I was expecting." So she was like, triggered. So that was again a toxic masculinity microaggression. I was like, well, I mean, your hair is really long. Like it's almost down to your butt. And it was just wet. And you're a girl and we're going to go out to dinner. So my assumption is you might take just a touch more time getting ready than me, who does literally nothing. And my hair is very short. That was just a logical, like, pragmatic comment, but those were, like, toxic masculinity microaggressions that I showed that I was a misogynist or whatever, but also at the same time, like, I'm the most sensitive, kindest, most understanding, intuitive, empathic, gentle yet strong guy that she'd ever met. Meaning I'm able to have all these soft qualities, but also still able to be assertive, be a planner, take the lead, take the initiative, have also that role, but do it in a way that's, sensitive and considerate, right? Not just domineering and whatever. Um, so I thought that was a really funny experience. And then I ended up ending things with her because I'm like, you are profoundly confused. You're number one, you're saying these two things about me that are polar oppositely contradicting. Number one, there's that. Number two, it's not even remotely true because if I was truly this one thing, I wouldn't be able to be the other thing. And number three, the reasons for this thing are absolutely pathetic because I made a couple of like stupid comments earnestly. And then the fourth reason, and this is the kicker, is this lady was a therapist. She was, she was seeing clients while also interning, while also, I think, also in school and also doing her own therapy work, right? So she had her last relationship had ended, I don't know, maybe 6 months prior, but she still had some of her ex's stuff and some of her stuff in her trunk that she just didn't feel ready to let go of. So she's been in therapy for, I don't know, months, trying to process and work through all of the feelings and doing like Jungian things and painting and drawing and free association and EMDR, trauma release, and so many different things because she didn't feel yet ready to be in the place to remove the junk from her trunk of her car. And I'm like, look, dude, there's a huge garbage can right in front of my apartment. Pull your car. Your car is already in front of the garbage can. Just pop the trunk and put it in there. Oh, I don't know. I don't know, think I can do it. I'm just not ready. I need more therapy. I'm just like, you've already been doing it for 6 months. The outcome is only just taking the shit and putting it in the garbage. That's the only outcome. Everything else you're doing is procrastination. Like, that's it. Oh, I don't know. I got to talk to my therapist, and we don't know if I'm ready. I'm like, dude, you can just pop the trunk, put the stuff in the garbage, and you're done. That's it. That's the outcome. That's the action. That's all you're trying to do. So I saw this confusion. I saw this moral conflict, and I saw this degree of just paralysis in this individual. And I'm like, dude, what world are you living in? For one, like you meet a guy that has all the things that you say that you want, meaning like I might not agree with what she's doing or what she believes, but I'm supportive and I'm like, yeah, okay, I see where you're coming from and whatever, right? Sure. But still, that degree of conflict. So why I say that and why I tell that story is many times in my life, people are like, you're mean, harsh, critical, judgmental, you're an asshole, too direct, you're all these things, right? But then on the flip side, I've also heard just as many times from strangers, from potential people I'm dating, or from whatever of like, wow, I really feel like understood, seen, heard. I feel like you get where I'm coming from. I feel like you can empathize. I feel like you can intuitively understand what I mean and why I mean it and communicate with me, blah, 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 blah. Heard all these things. Like, I can tell you how many first dates I've gone on where, within a short matter of minutes, they're just telling me so much stuff, revealing all of these things, or times where I've had conversations, they're like, whoa, things are just clicking. It's like, is this like a therapy session? Like, I'm just getting so much, like, so much stuff is clicking. And I'm like, I don't know, we're just having a conversation. My point is, how are both of those things able to be true at the same time? What I think is that I've had such a diverse and wide array of life experiences, positive and negative, put myself in a diverse array of situations, different social groups, or maybe I'm at the top, maybe I'm at the bottom, maybe I'm liked, maybe I'm disliked, maybe it's sports or business or finance or music or art or drug culture or spirituality or new age stuff or personal development or entrepreneurship or tai chi or qigong or yoga or so many different contexts of life that I put myself, or even like Christian church as an example. So many different contexts that I put myself in. To why? To understand peoples, to understand situations, to understand what drives them, to understand what motivates them. What are they what are they afraid of? What do they like? All these different things. So how I think people can have these experiences is because if you don't actually understand a person or where they're coming from, you can't really see them or hear them accurately. How do you actually understand where they're coming from? Well, you have to have some degree of accurate judgment and accurate understanding in order to arrive at being able to see and hear where someone else is coming from. And what I noticed over the years, countless times across basically every human interaction, is that most people don't understand. They don't care to understand. They've had a very limited life experience and they don't know their life experience is limited, but they choose to be defined by that and not realize that there's probably a lot more that they could learn. Whereas my attitude is, even if I meet someone that I don't like and don't disagree and I don't agree with, I will still learn from them. I will still try to garner and understand where they're coming from. Give you another great example. I went on a date with this super awful, like genuinely unpleasant left wing lady who spent most of the day trashing men, trashing the patriarchy, saying all this kind of just nonsense stuff. And I was there and I was like, well, I can sit at home by myself or I can eat dinner and just be entertained and maybe learn some shit, right? So this person that I don't agree with basically at all literally just was like, came out at the end of the day, it was like, hey, totally joking, but like, would you want to sleep with me after this? And I'm like, nah, I'm good. And they're like, oh, okay, sure, sure. But what, do you just watch a movie or something? That'd be fine, right? I was like, nah, I think I'm good. I'm gonna go home. But the fact of the matter is, I could sit there with someone that I don't actually agree with, don't even actually like as a person, to be totally fair. I thought was an awful individual. They told me some just horrific stories. But I learned quite a lot, and I was able to sit there and engage with them and understand where they're coming from, empathize, communicate, so much so that they're basically like, wow, this guy's cool. Wow, I like this person. And it's like, but I realize a lot of people don't actually have that ability, or they just don't care to, or whatever it is, or maybe I'm just a retard, and a complete idiot. I don't know, but I think having a diverse array of life experience and perspectives on things and being able to understand a wide array of things is an asset, is a useful thing, and makes life typically more enjoyable. So what I think happens is that people tend to judge things from their own limited experience. So if I say I can do something, like I can tell you, for example, um, I've told people like, yeah, I can to a large extent kind of predict people's reactions, their behaviors, or what they're going to do in a situation. Like if I know them at a certain point. And because that person can't do it, they say, oh, well, that's kind of arrogant of you. Like, or that's judgmental, or you have a preconceived idea, or all these like stupid things. And it's like, no, retard, no idiot, no dumbass. That's what you think because you have fixed ideas. I have a running concept that I can update at any time, that I can admit is incorrect at any time, that I can be proven wrong at any time. But it's a running concept with a shitload of time, energy, and experience behind it that typically is accurate. If it isn't, then I'll abandon it. Accuracy is the key word, but because they can't do it, because they think in fixed, standardized views, they assume everyone else thinks in fixed, standardized views as well. And it's like, well, no, you're just less human or less using your own ability because you just think in, is this left, right wing, or right? Is it left wing or right wing? I can't tell. Does this agree with what's on the news? Oh no, it's a conspiracy theory. Oh, is this person an atheist? Oh, or no, are they a Christian? Oh. Either way is not particularly bright or intelligent. It's pretty like pretty primate like. Banana good, banana bad. Ripe banana good, unripe banana bad. Or whatever the fuck. I mean, they probably don't even care to that degree, but it's a similar sort of situation in terms of like anyway, I just want to tell that story and illustrate a few different other points to drive a few different things home. So hopefully that makes sense and has been entertaining or useful in any way, shape, or form. But just kind of shed some context and light on a lot of different things and just underlines really, at least for me, the vast majority of the time, if I'm dealing with people, I'm practicing being polite. I'm practicing trying to learn and understand where they're coming from. And I'm practicing trying to be kind and considerate. It's rare where I meet someone where I feel like I can actually communicate with them because I feel like they can actually engage in like a real, like they're actually in the room. They're actually like, oh, there's a real living thing here that I can interact with. The rest of the time, it's just polite, kind, considerate. So I would just encourage you to go out into your own life and start observing how much do you actually listen to other people? How much do people actually listen to you? And then just you can sometimes I had a phase where I just started seeing how little could I actually do? How little could I actually participate or engage in a conversation for and still achieve a positive outcome because of how the person is just 98% just on autopilot. You just kind of have to like figure out just the right little thing. Um, so that was a weird experience because you realize just sometimes how little is is actually required. Which to me that was actually really useful for social anxiety because people have a lot of people have social anxieties, different things. And the thing is, people try to solve their problems without actual understanding, without actual insight. Oh, what trick can I use to feel more comfortable? Visualize this, visualize that, do this, do that. And that's all just anxiety on anxiety, right? But how about actually just trying to understand the situation as it is? And usually that understanding and insight will dissolve whatever fear or worry or anxiety you had because you realized that it was absurd. So usually people were anxious in social situations because they're like, oh, what do I say? What do I do? Everyone's going to notice this. Everyone's going to notice that. People are going to know when I'm doing this. People are going to think this. People are going to think that. So it's like, okay, well, maybe just check and see what do people actually notice? What do people actually think? And usually it's a lot less than you actually are worrying about. Because I guarantee you, if you're caught up in that social anxiety, you're not noticing very much. Or maybe you are noticing a shitload and that's what's giving you anxiety. So you need to kind of dial it down a bit because it's or use it for something constructive. But it's just one of those things to where I think learning to actually think more critically, rationally, and accurately through actually being productively judgmental can solve a lot of problems because that's what problem solving is. So if you have a problem and you're not trying to use it through solving, so if you have a problem and you're not trying to solve it through actual problem solving things, then then are you even trying to solve it, or are you just perpetuating it more? Is kind of a silly way of looking at it. Um, love comes from within. Best to not go out looking for love. Yeah, I mean, in some ways, yeah, for sure. I'll just leave it at that. To me, I just think of love as a well, at least a foundational starting point of just is neutrality, accuracy, honesty. Um, because if you don't have those things, then really maybe you love something, but it's probably some self-serving distortion. Or if you love yourself, it's maybe out of a bitter reaction or some hurt from the outside world, which is also not really love. It's just a hurt-based reaction. Um, so it's like definitely something to unpack and also look at. But it's also, I mean, at least in my opinion, is one of the last things I'll say. I think the vast majority of all the spiritual stuff that's out there is completely non-helpful and non-useful and takes people in the wrong direction. Most of the self-help stuff, I would say the same. It just makes people more complicated, more deluded, more anxious, more confused. It doesn't really do a lot because it doesn't actually develop the capacities, the inherent capacities that people need to be efficient and effective in the world. The only thing that helps you be efficient and effective in the world is doing things that do that. That's it. But stay being in the moment, acknowledging the pain body, or whatever Eckhart Tolle nonsense or Ram Dass or any of these other divergent characters just makes people weaker and more confused. Period. End of story. Sure, it might offer some temporary relaxation or give people like validation and feeling cool. But that's about it. Any thoughts on red pill and black pill content? I actually don't know what black pill is. Red pill, yeah. I mean, again, I think I've said this in some other videos, but I think, of course, there's truth to it, just like there's truth to feminism and truth to the patriarchy and truth to any of these theories. Because if there was no truth to them, no one would believe in them. even like COVID or political ideas or conspiracies or whatever things that get pushed through the world, there's always some degree of truth to it. And that's what keeps it together. If it was completely false, that would be even more difficult to push through. Um, so yeah, I think it's probably a waste of time and energy. Red pill and black pill, probably a waste of time and energy, and people are probably just bitter and hurt within themselves. And it's these things can very easily become a self-fulfilling prophecy. These things very easily just become echo chambers where it's like, here's my opinion, and you find a bunch of other people that have the same opinion, and y'all just validate each other's opinions. And then you go out in the world and be like, oh my God, look what happened. And they're like, see, I told you. So you develop basically the same kind of dogma as anyone else. But it makes you feel emotionally strong because you're like, I got this idea, I got this ideology, so I feel emotionally strong. But just kind of another thing. So that's my opinion of it. So I would say this is how I approach um, genres or niches or like sub communities. Is I get it. I go in and I find out what do they actually have right, what is actually useful, what that's not actually going to take me in the wrong direction, and just kind of disregard all the rest of it and ignore all the other bullshit. I don't care about the camaraderie. I don't care about the circle jerk of emotional validation. None of that. Just go in and say, what do they have right? What can it be useful and beneficial for me? And then how can I move on? That's it. That's my idea. That's why I say you can get into these things and maybe see where people were coming from, but I really would not be consumed by it and would not make a career out of it. Um, because it's just, you know, I don't know about black pill, whatever that even means, but in terms of red pill stuff, like we can blame women, we can point out all the things that women are doing. But at the same time, like you, like, oh, OnlyFans, women are doing this, women are so that. It's like, bro, they're only doing that because millions and millions of men are giving them money. If those men weren't giving the money, they wouldn't do it. Just like strip clubs wouldn't exist if men weren't going there and giving them money. It's nothing new. It's just the same dynamics, just in a different platform. So a lot of the problems that occur, we can also blame men for because men have a lot of problems. Yes, maybe they inherited it from society, maybe they were given a BS raw deal. But if they sit there and blame society for their stake in life, they're actually just functionally identical to the people that they claim to be against. Women do what they do because they're saying, or these extreme feminist left-wing women are blaming society because society gave them all these views, so they have to go to another extreme to counteract those views. Well, these dudes are just saying the same thing. Oh, society gave me all these views, so I got to do this other thing. You guys are this. You guys are the exact same. You're not doing anything different. It's the exact same shit, but you don't realize it. Okay, cool, great. Um, so because if you ask women, why are you this way? Society, yes, but also men are a certain way, and men did this to me. Okay, well, you ask men, why are you this way? Well, society is this way, and women did this to me. Cool. Everyone's blaming everyone else, and no one's doing anything about it. Cool. Great. Let's just all keep blaming everyone else. Let's just keep getting more isolated, keep getting more cynical and hopeless and dystopian, and that's the exact reality and the exact outcome that we'll all create. Maybe it's by design, maybe it's on purpose, maybe it's being encouraged, who knows? Maybe there's a massive financial incentive for people to feel that way. Who knows? But either way, it's people actively participating in their own demise. That's ultimately all it is and ultimately what it is. So that's why I think of it. Um, it's just, yeah, more automaton, robotic, reactionary people. Um, but on the flip side, yeah, I don't want to go too deep into that rabbit hole. It's not really my stick, but I guess the last thing I'll say about it is, if you ask women who controls the sexual market, who controls who gets access to sex and when they get it, and under what circumstances they get it, typically that's women. So then if women are to blame for this, and people are complaining about hookup culture and people not wanting relationships and widespread polyamory and widespread moral decline, widespread, just the whole fabric of monogamous relationships crumbling, who can we blame? Well, who controls access to that particular thing? We might be able to blame them to a large degree. Cool. But then also on the flip side, we have to take that a step further and be like, well, what are men, what are their role in that? They could also stop participating in that engagement. They could also stop doing hookups and casual sex. They could also just stop poor communication and ghosting and treating people like shit and not having consideration. They could stop being weak. They could stop being pushovers. They could learn how to be soft and considerate while being strong, because you can do both of those things. You don't have to be a pushover like simp and to be nice. You can be kind and extremely strong and assertive at the same time. Um, so those things can all occur and be true at the same time. So that's kind of what I think about it. But also, you know, there is also the element where a lot of people are profoundly confused. You can't deny that. You can't deny these social dynamics, and I've also just made the last however long of this video talking about it. So, anywho, I need to jump off before this gets too long. I actually did not want it. I say this every fucking time. I didn't want it to be this long. I just wanted to pop in and off, but here we are. That's what I get for drinking a latte and then doing a live stream. So, anyways, I have more work to do. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks for your support. And hopefully, people don't interpret my criticisms or my pointing out of dysfunctional dynamics as cynicism, because it isn't. It's just these things occur, they are real, they do exist. Maybe they're uncomfortable, maybe they're unpleasant, maybe they're harsh. But I hate to break it to you, but some parts of life are uncomfortable, are harsh, and are unpleasant to deal with. If you don't want to deal with them, fine. Just bury your head in the sand and act like they don't exist. But otherwise, those problems will persist. So I guess it goes back to the whole red pill, black pill, fucking feminism, patriarchy, left wing thing. Is like the more people persist in creating their own demises, the more that will actually increase the more that will grow. The more people avoid uncomfortable conversations with themselves, first and foremost, they avoid taking responsibility, they avoid looking at their own behavior, their own actions. The worst things they're going to get. And that's really the thing that's missing, I think, is people actually looking at their own behavior and their own things. Um, because that's hard, and that's uncomfortable, and that's honestly I just noticed that also too. As given if you give advice to people, or because people be mad at me because like, oh, you make all these negative videos, you point out all these problems, but like you don't give solutions. You're so negative. I'm like, yeah, I do give solutions. I give a lot of them, and I tell people exactly what to do. But then the response is, oh, it's boring, or oh, it's hard, oh, it's difficult, oh, I can't do it because of this, oh, I can't do it because of that, oh, I'm busy. Da, 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 da. It's like, how did we get to the point in life where we just treat everyone like they're a complete and utter incompetent idiot? Don't worry about changing your life. Don't worry about having any participation in your own life. Just take a pill and don't worry about it. Just swallow some emotional thing and feel better about yourself and move on with your life, but don't do anything. It's like, I don't know, maybe challenge people and talk to them as if they are actually adults that can actually make different decisions and can actually change their life for the better. But it's like, if you have that attitude, it's just excuse, 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 excuse. It's like, okay, well then what are you wasting your time engaging in content that's trying to solve problems? Because that's ultimately all I'm interested in, is solving problems. Don't really care about much of anything else. And I'm actually not that cynical of an individual. It just might appear that way because the small fraction of me that you see on the internet is just focused around me pointing out dysfunctional dynamics, how and why they occur, and then how we can navigate them and resolve them within ourselves and navigate the world in a better way. That's basically just problem solving, which I think is an optimistic, positive, useful life skill. But I guess for a lot of people, it's harsh or mean, which I envy them, because maybe they've never encountered the harsh, mean realities of life, of which I'm happy for them. And I hope their life continues to be just really soft, kind, and gentle, and they never have to have opinions or think about things or work hard or engage with things or make personal sacrifices or have discipline or have courage or any of these other qualities of life that are challenging and difficult, you know. And obviously, I know it's not that simple, cut and dry, black and white. But at the end of the day, when you speak in language and you speak in general terms to an audience of general people, you have to somewhat make some fucking concessions like that. So, anyways, thanks for tuning in.